Damn it, how's this? Oh, crap, we're recording. Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic very close to my heart, that of international climate change negotiations. You see, in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, known as the UNFCCC, there are various negotiating blocks of countries, each arguing for their own position and trying to get the best deal for them in climate change. So today I'll be talking about one of these negotiating blocks, namely the Group of 77 and China. So please, sit back, relax, enjoy the video, enrich your minds, and I'll be right back here waiting for you.
The Group of 77, herein referred to as G77, was not established in response to climate negotiations. Rather, it was established at the UN Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva, 1964. It is a loose coalition of developing nations from Latin America, Africa, and Asia, such as Brazil, Lebanon, and Thailand, just to name a few. The number 77 denotes the number of founding members of the organisation, but this number has ballooned over the years to currently sitting at 125. Very little actually unites all these different countries, as many have vastly different cultures, languages, and political systems. What brings them together are their similar positions in the world economy and a shared desire to add their small voices to a larger whole, in order to prevent themselves from being unfairly disadvantaged by climate change policy. This is especially necessary when the power and influence wielded by these individual countries in international negotiations pales in comparison to that of others, such as the United States and other developed global north countries. The G77 takes the position that the responsibility for climate change should be based on the principle of common yet differentiated responsibility as well as historical responsibility. For them, most of the responsibility for the current climate predicament lies with the developed world, whose actions over the past several centuries have been responsible for the vast majority of carbon emissions. Because of this, the developed world should bear the brunt of the burden for action on climate change mitigation, while the global south shouldn't have to suffer the same costs as the global north because their nations have not created the same amount of environmental damage. Despite this position, nations of the G77 argued that they should not have their own development stifled and should be allowed to industrialise in order to enjoy the same economic benefits of industrialisation as the global north. This may seem hypocritical at first, but the G77 contends that because the global north now has the technology to allow for development in the global south without the environmental drawbacks, there should be free and unrestricted sharing of technology between the north and the south. Climate change is known as a threat multiplier, exacerbating previously existing political and social problems indirectly through its environmental damage. Most projections of the potential damage of climate change agree that the global south will suffer the most, mainly because they do not possess the same level of infrastructure and political stability as the north. Thus, to allow the north to not do anything to help the south, despite climate change being a problem they created, is wholly unfair, and thus the reason why the G77 takes this stance. China is the most unique member of this group, and the simple fact that it associates itself with the G77 shows how China perceives, or likes to perceive itself, in the sphere of international relations. As mentioned, despite the fact that the G77 was initiated in order to give a voice to the world's less powerful nations, China does not fit this description. It is the world's second largest economy, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and currently has the largest standing army and military force on the planet. China is a force to be reckoned with, and even the United States has to take China into account very seriously when creating foreign policy. However, China likes to consider itself a developing nation, one that has not yet reached the levels of development seen in the global north. When making climate change policy, all nations are affected by the two-level game, where their position is affected by both powerful domestic and international forces. China is currently going through a large economic boom, and in order to remain competitive with the West, it needs to support corporations whose actions more than likely result in larger emissions. This has led to China becoming the largest emitter of CO2 in the world, but still takes the position of a developing country, and thus should not bear the same burdens that climate change mitigation would require when it has not reaped the same benefits as the global north. This creates the question of whether or not China is being genuine in its belief that it is a developing nation, or merely taking the position of one for purely selfish reasons. Even the other member nations of the G77 see this as an issue, and is why China is only an associate member of this group. It votes with the G77 in international matters, but has no direct say in the creation of its policies.
In summary, what have we learned today? We've learned that the G77 is a powerhouse in international climate negotiations, representing a majority share of the world's countries, as well as billions upon billions of people. For any climate change treaty to pass effectively, the G77 needs to agree on it. Also, the G77's position in climate change negotiations is based on historic and common yet differentiated responsibilities. They feel that because they didn't have a hand in creating climate change and that their carbon emissions pale in comparison to that of other nations in the developed world, they shouldn't have to suffer the same burdens as other global north countries. At the same time, however, they don't feel that they should have their own development stifled and should be allowed to industrialise in order to enjoy the same economic benefits as those enjoyed by the global north. At the same time, however, they don't feel that they should have their own development stifled and should be allowed to industrialise in order to enjoy the same economic benefits. At the same time, however, I feel that the G77 is going to have to learn to endure some hardships when it comes to climate change mitigation, and may even have cuts to their own development, because climate change is a global issue, and it's going to require everyone to work together if we have any hope of combating it effectively. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for watching. I most certainly appreciate it. Please like or subscribe. It really helps me out. I'm just joking. I'd really rather that you didn't. And I'll see you next time. Thanks again.